Let's take a look at creating figures. Please note that this tutorial was created on an iPad Pro using Animation Pro version 1. Your screens may look a little different. You can access the Animation Pro figure editor via the Create Crop menu at the top of the screen. Press the button with the picture of the spanner on it and select Create a Figure. Let me start by running through the 8 buttons at the top of the screen. The first will exit the figure editor and return you to the last Animation Pro screen that you were using. The second opens the File Manager, allowing you to open existing figures for editing. The third is the Remove menu, and may be used to remove a branch from a figure or all of its items. The fourth may be pressed to test your figure. On the right-hand side is the Output menu. You can use this menu to save, share, or email a figure. Next to it is the Figure Editor Options menu. This allows you to select a branch in your figure or all of its items and set the current figure as an onion skin. The 7th button opens the Create Crop menu. From here you can navigate to the Image Creator, the Mouth Creator, or the Image Cropping tool. Finally, the last button opens the Animation Pro Help. It contains nearly 500 pages of help, so please check it out. You'll notice that there are 2 dots in the middle of the screen. The red dot is the figure's hub. It's the starting point from which you will create your figure. The second yellow dot is the figure's anchor point. Whilst animating, this is the point about which the figure will rotate, scale, and shear. It's also used to select and move your figure, so it's important to have it in the right position as its location can't be adjusted whilst animating. To move the anchor point, tap on it, drag it to a new position, and then tap on it again. Now the Animation Pro Figure Editor allows you to create everything from simple stick figures to complex character rigs containing images, text, or mouths that can automatically lip sync. The items that make up a figure can pivot, stretch, or bend, or be completely static. So let's start by creating a simple stick figure. In order to add a stick to my figure, I first need to be in build mode. The figure editor has 2 modes, Move mode and Build mode, and these are controlled by the 2 buttons shown here. In build mode, the red hub and the figure's item handles will all have little plus symbols on them. This indicates that another item, such as another stick, may be added to them. In Move mode, the hub and handles won't display the plus symbol. In Move mode, you can alter the position of the item handles, but you can't add to them. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, the hub cannot be moved regardless of the mode. So let's select Build mode. To add a stick to the hub, I simply tap, drag, and release. Animation Pro will add a new item handle to the point of release. You can add more sticks onto these, so let's now complete the body of our stick figure. Finally, we'll add a head. The simplest way to do that right now is to add another stick and then press the circle button as shown to turn it into a circle. The figure editor allows the last 20 changes made to a figure to be undone. So if you've done something wrong, press the undo button at the top of the screen to remove your last change. Let's put the figure's head back in place. So now I have a basic stick figure. If I press the tick button at the top of the screen, I can try it out. Whenever you finish testing a figure, Animation Pro will ask whether you'd like to keep all of the items in their current position. In this case, I'll say no. Okay, so there's a few more things that I should mention before we proceed. Firstly, the item that's currently selected in your figure will have a blue halo. You can select a different item by tapping on its handle. If you tap on an item that's already selected, you can toggle between build mode and move mode without having to press either of the buttons at the bottom of the screen. If you hold your finger down on a selected item for a second and then release, Animation Pro will ask if you'd like to select all items in the branch, or all items in the entire figure. This can also be done via the Options menu at the top of the screen. You can deselect items by tapping anywhere else on the grid. So let's zoom out and select a branch. A branch is defined as the selected item plus any other items that have been joined onto it. We can now use the line width dial at the bottom of the screen to adjust the width of every stick in the branch at the same time. Let's now repeat that process for the figure's arms. In Animation Pro, each item in a figure can be individually coloured, so let's give the figure some colour. We'll start by selecting all of its items. Then we'll press the Colour button at the bottom of the screen to bring up the Colour popover. You can select a colour by tapping on it or dragging your finger across the colour swatch. Once a colour has been selected, you can choose a lighter shade by tapping on or dragging your finger across the gradient above the colour swatch. If you'd like more precise control over your colour selection, press the blue button beneath the colour swatch. This will bring up RGB dials to individually adjust the red, green or blue components that make up a colour. Press the little blue button again to return to the colour swatch. Finally, the dial at the bottom of the item colour popover can be used to set the opacity of the selected items in your figure. Let's repeat the process to give our figure some pants. Now, before we finish with the stick figure and move on to something a little more complex, I'd like to talk a little bit about a few of the other properties that may be assigned to the items in your figure. Firstly, items can be either static or flexible. Use the two buttons at the bottom of the screen, as shown, to make the items in your figure either static or flexible. When creating a figure, static items will have a grey handle. When animating, no handle will appear at all for these items. In other words, static items can't be moved whilst animating. Secondly, flexible items may also be bendable or stretchable. Use the two switches at the bottom of the screen, as shown, to make your items bendable, stretchable, or both. To demonstrate all of this, I'll make one of the figure's legs static. I'll make one of the forearms bendable, the other stretchable, and his torso both stretchable and bendable. Let's now see how those items behave when I test the figure. As you can see, the figure's lower leg doesn't have a handle, so it can't be moved like the other leg. One of the arms can be stretched, and the other bent. The figure's torso can be both stretched and bent. Let's now take a look at something a little more complicated. I'll start by constructing a crude upper body skeleton using simple sticks. I'll add one for the torso, one for the head, a couple of shoulders, and then I'll add some upper and then lower arms. Please note that I've added an extra stick between the upper and lower parts of the figure's arms. These will come in useful, as we'll see shortly. Next, I'll put the figure creator into move mode, and then I'll select the stick that I added first for the torso. The three buttons at the bottom of the screen allow you to replace selected sticks with either an image, a mouth, or text. In this case, I'm going to replace the stick with an image. Animation Pro will open the File Manager and display all of the user images currently in its library. I'm going to select the image of a torso that I created earlier using Animation Pro's Image Creator. Because I dragged that first stick upwards, the image is now upside down. You can easily adjust the items in your figure by pressing the button with the picture of the spanner on it at the bottom of the screen. Now, the items that make up a figure occupy layers that overlap each other. To make it easier for you to see the item that you're adjusting, Animation Pro shows all other items above that item as semi-transparent. The item adjustment screen can be used to make a whole range of changes. You can adjust the position of an item by dragging it with your finger. You can use 2 fingers to change its scale. Using the buttons at the bottom left of the screen, you can also choose to stretch your item horizontally, vertically, or proportionally. The dial at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen can be used to make the item transparent or even invisible. The button with the double-ended arrow on it can be used to flip the image. The button below it will only appear where the item in your figure is not already bendable. It puts the item adjustment screen into bend mode, adding additional handles to the item temporarily so that it may be bent. Unlike bendable items created via the main figure editor screen, this form of bending allows the endpoints of the item to be moved as well. When you've finished bending the item, press the bend button again to exit bend mode. The button below that may be used to tint an item. I like to create my images without any colour, so that they may be tinted later. The best way to turn the white in an image into another colour is to select Multiply as the blend mode, then tap on the colour swatch. As with the colour selection elsewhere in Animation Pro, you can select a lighter colour by tapping on the gradient, or even select a colour via its RGB components. When tinting, you can also select the strength of the tint. Finally, you can rotate the item in 90-degree increments to the left or to the right, or, using the dial at the bottom of the screen, rotate the item to any desired angle. It's fair to say that I've now made a pretty good mess of the figure's torso. The 2 buttons at the bottom right of the screen may thus be used to either undo particular changes or reset them back to default values. In this case, I'm going to undo a whole bunch of things and then simply adjust the position and size of the item. I'm now happy with that, so I'll press the tick at the top left of the screen to keep the adjustments. I'll now repeat the process a few more times to add some more body parts. Items pivot around the handle that they're joined to, so I'll move the head down a little. The head's too small, so I'll make it a little bigger. Next, I'll add a couple of upper arms. So far so good. Now I'll add the figure's forearms. Notice that I'm leaving sticks between the upper and lower arms. I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. Okay, so as I mentioned before, items pivot around the handle that they're joined to. Now the handles belonging to the upper arms are not really in the best positions for the lower arms to pivot around. So I can get around that by adding an additional stick between the upper and lower arms, positioning the lower arms to pivot around their handles, and then dragging the sticks into a better position such that the upper and lower arms are aligned. Let's press the test button at the top of the screen to see how it's all going. That's looking pretty good. I'll exit test mode, leaving the forearms in their new positions so that they're a little easier to work with. Next, I'll add some features to the figure's head. Using 2 fingers, I'll zoom in a little so it's easier to see. First, I'll add another stick for the figure's hair. I'll then go back into move mode and drag the hair around a little to get it into the right position. Next, I'll go back into build mode, create an intermediate stick, and then another for the figure's eyes. To complete the face, I'll add another intermediate stick, and then a final stick for the figure's mouth. I'll pick the mouth that I created in the Mouth Creator tutorial. Right, now we're getting somewhere. But all of those intermediate sticks don't look very good. And if I test the figure, you can see that they all have handles and can be dragged around whilst animating. So let's take a look at what can be done about that. Firstly, the figure's hair shouldn't move, so we'll make it static. Next, I'll exit build mode, select one of the intermediate sticks and make it static. We don't want to see the intermediate stick, so I'll use the line width dial at the bottom of the screen to set its width to 0. I'll now repeat the process for the other intermediate stick. Finally, I'll make the figure's mouth and the figure's eyes static as well. Now when I test the figure, we can see that the intermediate sticks are no longer visible and that there are no unnecessary handles. And through the magic of video, I'll quickly zip through rectifying the same problems with the figure's body. Now when I test the figure, I can see everything is working quite well, but you'll notice that the layers within the figure are all over the place. The figure's lower arms, for example, should be behind his upper arms. His right arm should be behind his body, and so should his head. Think of a figure as a stack of items. The position of an item in the stack is defined by its Z order. An item with a Z order of 0 will be at the bottom of the stack. An item with the largest Z order will be at the top. So given that the figure's body has already been selected, we can bring it all the way to the top by rotating the Z order dial at the bottom of the screen until it has the largest Z order value. We can repeat that process to bring the figure's left upper arm to the front. Similarly, we can use the dial to move the remainder of the items up or down to achieve the results we're looking for. A quick tip: if you'd like to see the Z orders for all of the items in your figure, press the button at the bottom of the screen as shown. In this view, Animation Pro will label each item with its Z order. Items above the currently selected item will be opaque, those below will be translucent. Press the button again to exit the view. I'm now going to give the figure a necktie. I'll select his body, put the figure editor into build mode, and then drag to create a new stick. Please note that we can't see the new stick as I'd previously set the line width to 0. In this case, I want the tie to be bendable. I'd also like to give it a bit of colour. And while I'm at it, I'll give his hair some colour as well. Here's another quick tip. It's not really necessary to make these kinds of item adjustments as you build your figures, as all of these item adjustments can be made at any time whilst animating. Let's now run one final test to see how this figure looks and behaves. You'll notice that when I bend the tie, the results look a little jagged. Don't worry about that. Animation Pro is performing a low resolution bend so it can do it quickly. When your animation is rendered, the tie will look much better. Alright, now before I finish with the editing part of this video, I should explain what the remaining buttons at the bottom of the screen do. The button with the 2 arrows on it can be used to flip your figure. If you've been zooming in and out on your figure, the 1 times button will centre the figure and return it to a scale of 1. The final button will centre the figure and scale it to fit on the screen. Once you're happy with your figure, you'll want to save it. Press the output button at the top of the screen and select Save Figure. Animation Pro will save the figure into its library under the User Figures category. It will then ask whether you'd like to create a substitution. Substitutions is quite a topic in its own right, so I'll be covering that in a separate tutorial. For now, I'll complete this tutorial by covering the remaining 2 items in the output menu, plus a short discussion on how to add text to a figure. Now, in addition to saving a figure, the Animation Pro output menu has 2 options for sharing your figure. The first brings up the standard iOS sharing popover. This can be used to send your figure to any other app that supports general file types. You can also use it to airdrop your figure to nearby devices. The last option in the output menu allows you to email the figure. In this case, Animation Pro will create the entire email for you, complete with a preview image. And now, finally, I've arrived at the very last item that I'd like to cover in this tutorial, and that's adding text. I'll start by creating a really simple stick figure with one stick. To add text, make sure that the stick is selected, and then press the ABC button at the bottom of the screen. This will bring up the Add Text popover. Start by adding some text into the field provided. The popover provides controls for selecting the desired font, the size of the font, and its level of opacity. I'm going to play roulette with the font name. On the right-hand side of the popover, you can select the colour of the text by tapping on the colour swatch. You can select a lighter version of that colour by tapping on the colour gradient. Alternatively, press the small blue button to manipulate the red, green and blue components of the colour individually. And when you're happy, press the green tick button. You'll notice that Animation Pro has added the text horizontally. Sometimes, however, it can be advantageous to add the text vertically, particularly if you wish to bend it. So let's do that again. This time, we'll explicitly select the second option at the bottom of the popover to position the handles to the left and the right of the text. I hope you found that as informative as I did. Thanks for watching.